How do you get a good score on the GED essay? Well, in this video, I'm going to break down a real GED writing example from a real GED test taker, so you're going to want to stick around. Hi, this is Parker from Test Prep Champions, teaching you how to pass the GED fast. You can get started by clicking the subscribe button down below. So I'm really excited about this essay because there's so much to learn here and there's so much value here. And so what I want you to do as you watch this is I want you to think, if this was your essay, what changes would you make? And also, what can you take away from this that you can use in your own writing to boost your score on the GED Language Arts section? So the prompt says to analyze the arguments presented in two guess columns and then write a response in which you develop an argument that explains how one position is better supported by the evidence than the other. And you don't have to read those two guess columns to get the most out of this video, but I'll put a link down below. So just a little background info about the prompt. And so when I teach the GED essay, I teach the 5-paragraph essay approach, which is the best way to maximize your score. And you want to start off with an introductory paragraph, a body, then 3 body paragraphs, a conclusion, and note that you should have 3 to 7 sentences per paragraph. And so when you write your introduction, you want to start off with a topic sentence in which you state what the topic is, and then you want to identify what both positions are. So I like to teach this in 2 different sentences. So one sentence you state author A's position, and then the next sentence you state author B's position, but you can combine them into one sentence if you'd like to. And then lastly, the most important part of your introduction is your own claim about which position is best supported. This is also called a thesis statement. Okay, so let's start off here with your introduction. So you say both articles from the Freeport Times, they offer positions that are supported by both fact and opinion. So if we just make 2 small changes here, you're going to have an amazing topic sentence to start off with here. So let's get rid of the comma and get rid of that word they altogether, and we're going to change the word support to supported. So it should read, both articles from the Freeport Times offer positions that are supported by both fact and opinion, and that's a really solid topic sentence that you'll have. So great work there. And so you go on to say the first article is wrote by Kai Fernandez, APRN, which she claimed parenting education should be mandatory. So, and then you go on and you talk about the other author, Sophie Thomas. And so really these next 2 sentences are great. You do a fantastic job of telling me what both authors' positions are, and your structure is perfect here so far. It's just that we want to change the grammar a little bit so this is more clear, and I would say something like, Fernandez, APRN, who wrote the first article, claims parenting education should be mandatory. And then for the next sentence here, we don't actually need to say that Sophie Thomas is a mother of 3. It's an interesting fact, but it's not necessary for your introduction here, so I would just say something like, in contrast, Sophie Thomas, who wrote the second article, claims new parents do not need mandatory education. And then lastly, the last thing I recommend is to get rid of that semicolon altogether and just put a comma after the word case and then put but after the comma, so it would read, both sides make an acceptable case, but the first provides a stronger argument. And the reason here is I just caution test takers to not use semicolons unless it's absolutely necessary, and it's very rare to have it be necessary to use a semicolon because it's kind of like a high risk, low reward thing because there's too big of a chance of making an error when using semicolons from my experience as a test prep guy, so I would just avoid that and just use commas instead. And so here's the version that I recommend here, and you can pause the video and look at this, read this more in depth if you want, but this is just your introduction with the changes that I recommend. So let's move on here and we'll look at your body paragraphs. And so the way I recommend you do body paragraphs, which is a proven way to maximize your score, is to start each body paragraph with a topic sentence, and you want to start each topic sentence with a transition word or phrase. Then the bulk of the body paragraph will be an explanation, which is 1 to 3 sentences, and you're just going to explain what you mean in the topic sentence and clarify it. And now you can also do refutations in your body paragraphs. You don't always have to do a refutation, but if you do a good job with your refutation, it can really strengthen your essay here. And so when we go to your first body paragraph, you say, one example of the first article's stronger argument is Kai Fernandez claim that new parents' lack of knowledge. So I would, first of all, I've highlighted one example, not because you did anything wrong, because I want to really compliment you for starting with a transitional phrase here. You started with one example, so that's a solid transitional phrase. So for those watching at home, here's a quick list of some words that you can start paragraphs with. You can also start lists with these. We've got first, second, third, next, in addition, also, last, in the first place and the second place, and these aren't the only ones. There are tons of transition words and phrases out there, but these are some good ones to use when in doubt. So good job with one example here. Now I've highlighted Fernandez's last name here because we want to use an apostrophe. So it's her claim, so we want to say Fernandez apostrophe S. And then we can get rid of that word of, which I've highlighted here. So it should say new parents lack knowledge. Then instead of writer, I would again just use Fernandez's name. You could say, Fernandez mentioned that in our society, many jobs require specific training, but there is no training for new parents. And you use an M dash and you say, help them to raising children. So I would just change that. I would say, for the new parents to help them raise children. That's what I would do to make it more clear. And so then I want to look at the last sentence here separately, so I haven't marked that. And so now I've marked the first and the last sentence here. And the reason that I'm showing you first of all, this body paragraph right here, I'm showing your essay with the changes that I recommend making so far, except the last sentence, which I didn't change anything here, but I've highlighted the first and the last sentences in green because I want us to look at the connection between them closer. So to comment on your structure here, in your topic sentence, you seem to be saying that the first article is stronger because Fernandez claims that new parents lack knowledge, and you follow that up with a logical point in the second sentence when you talk about how there's no new training for parents, but for other jobs they require training. So that's clear, that's logical here, but I recommend taking another look at your last sentence. It seems to me, as I read this, that you're trying to make the point here that new parents will face challenges and that both authors agree on this point. And so you're expressing a good idea here, so good thought process, but I don't think it's clear enough how this supports the first point you made in the topic sentence. So I'd add another sentence here to clarify for the reader how this point connects to your topic sentence, or just change the sentence here. So good ideas, but I would just make it clear because you want to make it crystal clear and very simple for the reader to understand the connection between your topic sentence and the last sentence here. And so just as a general quick tip for those watching at home, after you've written your topic sentence, make sure that every other sentence in the paragraph helps explain the topic sentence to the reader. So your explanation, the whole point of that is to make sure that you're explaining that topic sentence here. And so if a sentence doesn't do any work for you, doesn't make it more clear to the reader what your topic sentence is about, then you might want to either edit that sentence or scrap it altogether. So moving on now to your second body paragraph, you start off by saying another example of the better supported argument in the first article was, that Kai Fernandez claimed that society should equip parents with the skills they need. So I've highlighted another example here because you've done a great job using a transition phrase. So great job with that. And the next change I'd have you make is change better supported. We can make that one word and we can separate it with a hyphen. So better hyphen supported. And then I would get rid of the comma before the word that. That's another general principle here. As a general rule of thumb, we don't need a comma before that, so just keep that in mind in your writing. And then you go on to say here, need period, like some basic information, nutrition, health, and safety, and different children developmental stages here. So what I would do here is I would combine the first sentence with the second sentence. So I would get rid of that period and make L lowercase and say skills they need, comma, like some basic information. And then I would also change that portion that I've underlined here where you say different of children development stages. I think what you want to say here is something like different child development stages or differences of child development stage. So I'd take another look at that here. And then also I've highlighted your last sentence because I want you to take another look at that sentence as well. So you say she had an example in the article which understands babies crying is communicate or just being naughty, which will help parents to adjust their expectation and behavior. So the reason I want you to take another look at this is because it's not 100% clear what you're meaning to say here. And so it seems to me that the point you're making here is that mandatory training is the stronger position because parents will learn that when babies cry, they are trying to communicate and aren't just trying to be naughty, and that this training will help parents to adjust their expectations and behavior. And so I think that's kind of what you're trying to say here, but I don't think it's 100% clear. So I would just take another look at this, see how you can communicate your idea more clearly and more simply here. Maybe you could change up the wording here, or you could break this down into multiple sentences, but I think you want to double check this, make sure that your meaning is really clear. And this is another really good point here, and something that a lot of students learn from having someone look at their writing. I know I sure learned this when I was in school, when I was working on writing. You know, you can have an idea in your head that seems perfectly clear to you. It can seem like it makes so much sense to you, but then when someone else reads it, they can come away with an entirely different meaning. So I would just try to simplify this down so we can make more sense of what you're trying to say here, because I think that your ideas are good here, and I can kind of see what you're trying to say, but I'm not 100% sure. So we want to change it so I'm 100% sure. And so I also want to show this slide here with strong arguments for two reasons. And one is for those watching at home who want to improve their writing, because understanding what makes up a strong argument is going to help make your writing more clear. So when you're reading the passages, you want to look for places where they're using specific examples or facts, data, statistics, and surveys, recent dates or results from research studies and experiments. These are all indications that someone is making a strong argument. To look at your third paragraph, again, you start off with another example, and again, this is a great use of transition phrase, so good job there. And so you say another example of the first article's stronger argument is the reference from the CDC and Department of Education in England, comma, the both studies about parents' education works. And so really, before I read any more of this paragraph, I just want to really commend you on your work here. This is a great paragraph. I think that this was honestly the strongest paragraph that you had here. You're doing a lot of great things here. So if we just tweak some of your grammar, some of your wording here to make this more clear, I think that this will be a phenomenal body paragraph that would maximize your score. So really, the first thing that I would change is I'd get rid of the word the here in where it says England, comma, the both studies. So you don't need that word there. And I've highlighted parents just to think about this here. So if you're talking about like more than one set of parents here, then you would want to have the apostrophe after the S. So just something to think about. Then you go on to say the CDC study claims that, quote, Safe to Sleep campaign helped reduce, and we want to change that to helped reduce. And then you go on to say other study by Department of Education in your next sentence here. And so I've highlighted other because I think you mean to say another study by Department of Education. And you could put the word the here. So you could say another study by the Department of Education in England found that parents are important roles in children's developmental stages. So I would change the word are to the word play. So it should read that parents play important roles in the children's development stage. And so I would have you change the word important to necessary. So I've highlighted important in green because you didn't do anything wrong here. Important is totally a valid word to use here, but I would use the word necessary because I think it's going to make what you're trying to say here more persuasive. So you could say parents play necessary roles in children's development stage. I think that that's just a stronger word here that you could use. And so other than that, though, you've done a phenomenal job with this paragraph here. And so really, I've highlighted this section in green because I love this so much here. So everybody watching, take notes on how you did this here. You said the CDC study claims that Safe to Sleep campaign helped to reduce sudden infant death syndrome by 50% since 1994 by teaching parents to put babies to bed on their backs. And so I'm showing this now with some grammar changes that I would recommend that you make, but really I just want to also compliment you. You did a great job with this paragraph. Just those few tweaks that I recommend would make a difference, I think. And also I put a little note here at the end. It says add on, and I've highlighted that in green. And the reason is because I think you could strengthen this by just adding one more sentence here just to draw more of a direct connection between the study that you're referencing in your last sentence here where you say the study found, quote, children whose parents use harsher inconsistent disciplines, etc., etc. I think that study makes a good point. I think it's kind of an implied point here. I think you can make it more direct if you just added another sentence to just say something like, this demonstrates that mandatory parental education has proven benefits. You just want to make it simple and just really connect the dots. Don't assume that the reader will connect the dots themselves. Some people will, but you want to try to spell it out directly here. And so really, good job on that paragraph. So now let's look at your conclusion here, and as I go through your conclusion here, what I want to point out, first of all, is that there's one major error here in the first sentence. So for those following along, do you see what it is? Where you say, despite the argument and evidence given by Kai Fernandez's article, it appears that the parenting education should be mandatory, offers a stronger case. So what is the big mistake here that we see? Well, let me just spell it out for you here. So let's review the two authors' positions. So we know that Fernandez believes education should be mandatory, and we know that Thomas believes that it shouldn't be. Okay, and so in your first sentence, I think you want to say Sophie Thomas instead of Fernandez here. So I think you really want to say that the evidence given by Sophie Thomas's article, it appears that parenting education should be mandatory, offers a stronger case. So I think that you wanted to put Sophie Thomas's name there, and so that's okay. It's just practice here, but just something to keep in mind. And also, you don't need the word the in front of the author's name. So I think since this is just practice, then that it's okay to make these kind of mistakes in practice, but that's just the kind of thing when you edit your work, just look for that consistency. And this really goes back to, in the introduction, why I always have students just spell out author A's position and author B's position. So this is a perfect example of why that's so important. And you actually did a perfect job of that in your first paragraph. So I think by the conclusion, we just want to make sure that we've got this consistency here because it's going to add up here. And so also on my introduction slide, the other thing that I wanted to mention here is, does anybody remember where I talked about the rebuttal or the refutation? So I've highlighted the sentence in green here because it looks like you're starting to do a good refutation here. So good job with that. You say, for example, Sophie Thomas mentioned funding and enforcing problems, but no evidence and facts to support this argument. And so what I notice here is that a lot of test takers struggle with refutations in their essays, and so you've actually done a good job of starting off a refutation here, where you basically look at it, the argument that Sophie Thomas is making, and you point out why it's weak, and you just kind of blast the argument to shreds. So good job there. You're doing a good job introducing a refutation, but it's really leaving me as a reader wanting to know more about Thomas's ideas on funding and enforcing problems. So instead of bringing up your refutation here, and instead of bringing up this new example here in your conclusion, I recommend looking back at either your first or your second body paragraph and looking for a way that you could add this refutation into one of those paragraphs with at least, and then do another sentence or two that expands on this. So as a general rule of thumb here with conclusions, don't bring up anything new. And so this goes for new examples, things like that. And the reason is just because your body paragraphs are all about the explanation, and that they're there to give you space to do your explanation and your refutation. So in your conclusion, I would just stay away from introducing anything new. Make sure that you do that in your body paragraphs where you've got room to expand on it. And this is just a general rule of thumb, but I really recommend sticking to this here. So your conclusion should look really similar to your intro, but just changing the wording up a little bit. So that's just a minor point though, because you did a good job here with your conclusion overall. There's not a whole lot that I would recommend you change here. So overall, the test taker did an excellent job here with this writing sample, and I'm sure there was a lot you could take away from that. So I want you to just let me know down below what's one thing that you can take away from this and use in your own writing. And your next step, if you want to improve your writing, is to make sure that you've seen my video on how to go through the GED essay, and also don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if this was helpful, and thank you for watching.